Dubai Airshow is never meant to be silent. It's the one place on Earth where noise is the main attraction. F-45 afterburners tearing the air apart. Rafales shrieking through tight turns, Su-35s clawing open the sky with raw thrust. But this year, something broke its pattern, not with a roar, not with a flypast, not with a maneuver, with a shadow. It rolled out from China's pavilion slowly, most casually, a dark, angular presence with carrier-grade landing gear and a skin finish cleaner than anything Beijing had shown publicly before. The J-35, no engine start, no demonstration flight, not even a dramatic reveal, just a silhouette, a shape, a quiet arrival that froze the entire flight line. Pilots stopped mid-sentence. Analysts lowered their sunglasses. Journalists forgot to speak into their microphones because, even standing still under the Gulf sun, the jet was showing details the world wasn't expecting China to reveal yet: tracer-sealed internal bays, serrated inlets. A canopy line too refined for a prototype. It didn't look like a mock-up. It didn't look like a teptide. It looked finished. A Rafale pilot passing by halted first. He squinted at the wing shaping, stepped closer, then quietly muttered to his teammate, "Look at that surface work. No gaps. None." Behind him, an American contractor murmured, "Those inlet teeth. They're cleaner than the F-35s." A Chinese crew member nearby didn't respond. He just stood beside the jet, silent, almost as if the aircraft was expected to speak for itself. And somehow, it did, even without power, even without motion. The J-35 pulled every conversation in the entire airshow toward itself by noon. No one was talking about the F-35 display. No one cared about the Su-75 mock-up. No one even turned their head when the Typhoon lit its burners. Dubai's noise hadn't stopped. People had simply stopped listening to anything except the jet that wasn't making a sound, a jet that proved, in a single afternoon, that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly and silences everything else from far away. The J-35 looked like any stealth fighter being towed out for static, displayed arc gray finish. Sharp edges, carrier strength, nose gear, angular stance. But the closer people walked, the quieter they became. Something about the aircraft felt wrong for a prototype, not in a flawed whine, a too-perfect way. Defense analysts who had seen every leaked image, grainy satellite shot, and deck testing photo suddenly froze. They'd expected rivets. They expected panel misalignment. They expected prototype ugliness. They got none of it. A pair of Rafale pilots stopped first. One leaned in, tracing the line of the weapons bay with his eyes. "No panel seams," he whispered. "Not even hairline ones." Second pilot frowned. "That's productional skin, not mock-up skin." Behind them, an American contractor muttered under his breath, "Those inlet serrations. Longer than the F-35's, cleaner too." A Chinese crew member stood a few steps away, hands behind his back. Saying nothing, his silence said enough. The J-35's twin internal bays were shut flush, no hinge marks. No uneven edges. No testing plates. Its sensor blocks blended so cleanly into the fuselage that even pilots struggled to spot where the modules began. Nearby, a UAE engineer knelt near the exhaust area. "No exposed metal," he said quietly. "No round nozzle. Nothing reflective," another Emirati officer added. "That's IR suppression. This is not the old WS-19 demo engine." A Western journalist scribbled in her notepad, "China isn't hiding confidence anymore. They're exhibiting it." Eric Binmar, a veteran Emirati aerospace engineer who had attended 12 Dubai air shows in a row, stared at the jet for a long moment. Then he said the sentence that spread across the hall like electricity. "This is the first Chinese stealth jet that doesn't look like a prototype." He shook his head slowly. "This looks deployable." The comment reached the American booth in minutes. To Lockheed Martin representatives exchanged looks as they inspected the J-35's nose. "Those lower sensors," one whispered. "That's not FC-31 hardware." His colleague replied, "That's an updated EOTS block. And that nose gear. They're preparing it for Fujian's catapults." He wasn't wrong. The gear was larger, reinforced, clearly designed for electromagnetic launches. That alone sent a ripple of silence through every military observer. British photographer lifted his camera for a perfect cosmetic shot, then lowered it slowly. "What the hell?" he murmured. "This skin. It's absorbing sunlight. No reflections. No contours. Nothing." That was the moment the shift happened. People stopped calling it a Chinese F-35 copy.
Nice.
They stopped comparing it to the Su-57. The FC-31, the canceled prototypes. The leaked blueprints. They weren't dismissing it. Anymore, they were trying to understand it. The J-35 hadn't moved an inch. It hadn't powered on. It hadn't even opened a bay. And yet, for the first time in years at a major global air show, Western pilots weren't the ones commanding attention. China was, quietly, deliberately, almost surgically. And the silence around the J-35 suddenly felt more powerful than any afterburner on the runway. By midday, the J-35 had quietly become the center of gravity. Every nation's delegations, Saudi, Turkish, French, British, American, took slow, deliberate laps around it, each group trying to understand what they were looking at. And the more the experts studied it, the more unsettling it became. The Turkish engineers arrived first, the same team involved in the Khan program. One crouched near the leading edge, running his fingers along the surface. "This isn't prototype composite," he murmured. "This is operational grade." Another leaned in toward the bay hinges. "These aren't display hinges," he said flatly. "These are flight certified." The realization was like a quiet detonation. China hadn't brought a hollow showpiece. They had brought something dangerously close to a frontline jet. A small group of French Rafale specialists approached next. One narrowed his eyes at the wing root. "This is not FC-31 anymore," he said slowly. "This is another generation of it." Another pointed at the folding wing hinge line, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. "Carrier fighter," he muttered. Folded wings confirmed. They exchanged glances. All thinking the same thing? This is a serious aircraft. A few meters away, two American aerospace contractors were studying the chin of the jet. That EOTS unit. One whispered, "That's far smaller than the F-35's.
Nice.
Partner exhaled sharply. "Smaller. Aperture means lower RCS. That's a huge leap in. Miniaturization." Neither man spoke for several seconds, because that meant something. Western analysts weren't prepared to admit publicly. China had solved a problem the West assumed would take them years. Meanwhile, a group of UAE Air Force officers had gathered near the engine shroud. One officer traced the outline of the hidden exhaust. "No circular nozzle," he said. "No exposed plume surface." Another nodded quietly. "That's IR suppressed. They're chasing F-35 levels of heat management." A low ripple went through the group. If the J-35 had both low observable shaping and infrared suppression, this wasn't just stealth, it was survivability. It was naval endurance. It was a fifth-generation, catapult-ready fighter built for blue water operations. A senior, Emirati colonel finally voiced what everyone else was thinking. "Gentlemen, this is a real threat." Father, standing with his young son nearby, overheard the whispers. The boy pointed at the sky, where a Rafale mumps performing a tight vapor-shedding turn. "Why is nobody looking up?" he asked. The father answered honestly. "Because that jet," he nodded at the J-35, "doesn't need to fly to win." He was right. While every Western and Russian jet was tearing through the sky, roaring for attention, the crowd kept staring back at the one aircraft that refused to make a sound, a jet that wasn't performing, yet was outperforming everything. Because the truth was slowly sinking in across the tarmac, the J-35 didn't need a demonstration. Its presence was the demonstration. It stood there like a quiet question. The world didn't know how to answer, and for the first time in Dubai's history, noise wasn't the highlight, silence was. By the time the afternoon sun softened over Dubai, the air around the J-35 had changed. Footsteps slowed. Conversations faded. Delegations moved around it with the kind of steady, cautious pacing usually seen in military briefing rooms, not air shows, because everyone sensed the same thing. Something about this jet wasn't supposed to be public yet. The Turkish Khan engineering team stood closest, studying the stealth fighter with tight jaws. One of them traced a finger along the flush panel lines and whispered, "These surfaces. Prototypes never look this clean," another added. "And those composite layers? That's operational finishing, not a showroom dummy." Their silence afterward was telling. Across the tarmac, the French delegation clustered near the wing route. A Rafale M pilot squinted at the shaping, then exhaled slowly. "Look at the transitions. This isn't FC-31 anymore. This is the evolution of it." Another pointed at the subtle, razor-straight folding wing hinge. "They're showing a carrier aircraft," he said, "and not a theoretical one. A finished one." Even the usually confident French engineers didn't attempt a dismissive joke this time. A few meters away, 2 American contractors from the F-35 program were frozen near the JH-35's nose. One of them whispered that chin mount. "That's a full EOTS unit." His colleague leaned in, stunned, and smaller than ours. How the hell did they? He stopped mid-sentence, because admitting what they were thinking out loud would have been uncomfortable. Smaller meant lower RCS. Lower RCS meant better geometry. Better geometry meant China had leapfrogged a miniaturization milestone the West assumed would take decades. Meanwhile, the UAE Air Force delegation remained near the engine shroud. One officer crouched down, studying the hidden exhaust edges. "No round nozzle," he said. "No hot metal exposure. No heat bloom profile." Another officer nodded gravely. "This is IR suppressed. If the shaping is real, this jet can survive contested airspace." A soft murmur passed through the group. This wasn't stealth looking. This was stealth built. A Saudi general walked up next, his expression locked in calculation. He scanned the J-35 slowly, then said, "If the production version carries PL-15E, the entire Gulf balance shifts." His aide didn't disagree. Even the Russians, usually dismissive of Chinese aerospace, stood quietly at the trailing edge. A Sukhoi engineer crouched low, touching the seamless surface. "This finishing," he whispered. "Cleaner than our Su-57 prototypes." His partner nodded. Face tight, they've learned from everyone and built their own philosophy. The 2 engineers stepped back, unusually silent. For them to say nothing was louder than any complaint as the day transitioned toward golden hour. Demo jets roared above, Typhoons screaming, Rafales looping, F-16s clawing at the sky, but the crowd's focus never shifted. People clapped politely at the noise above, but their eyes kept drifting back to the one fighter refusing to perform. A British reporter filming near the front said it best. "Every jet roaring overhead is trying to prove superiority, but the one jet not moving at all, that's the one they're all afraid of." Because everyone understood a truth they didn't want to admit. If China was willing to show this much, what were they still hiding? The J-35 wasn't challenging anyone with noise. It was challenging them with certainty, and that certainty was beginning to feel like a warning. Golden hour in Dubai usually marks the loudest part of the air show. An engines scream. Vapor trails glow in the low sun. And every aircraft tries to steal the final applause, but not today. Because in the middle of all that noise, something happened quietly. No announcement, no countdown, no demonstration slot. The J-35. Powered up, not a full engine start, not a dramatic spull-up, just a faint hum, so soft it barely separated itself from the ambient. Crowd noise, but those who heard it froze. A subtle green pulse blinked along the fighter's spine, alive. Steady, deliberate. Ezra Kaplan, an Israeli aerospace analyst, watching from a few meters away, blinked hard. "That's not a mock-up," he whispered. "That jet systems are live." Before anyone could react, The canopy tint shifted just a shade, the exact kind of micro-dim that only happens when avionics starts cycling. Then the light from the targeting aperture under the nose flickered a soft, unmistakable glow the EOTS had activated. A ripple of unease shot through the crowd, pilots, engineers, contractors, journalists. Everyone understood what that meant. You do not power real avionics in public unless you want the world to know something. On the Turkish side, two con engineers stared wide-eyed at the glowing sensor window. Our fusion block still struggles in a lab, 8-1 muttered. These guys are running it on a runway. In front of cameras, nearby, the French delegation stiffened. Tiny green icons flickered across the canopy, the unmistakable flashes of a helmet-mounted display. Calibration cycle, a Rafale pilot whispered. That's not a show animation. That's a real interface coming online. But the moment that broke the airshow came a second later. A soft click. Barely audible, the J-35's left weapons bay shifted only 3 millimeters. No more a tiny automatic adjustment as part of an internal diagnostic. But it was enough. Enough for every expert to see the truth. The jet had a dual internal launcher, real, installed, functional. China had brought an aircraft to Dubai that was clearly capable of carrying PL-15E, long-range BV, RAMS, short-range stealth weapons future. Jamming decoy pods, electronic warfare modules, not on paper, not in a brochure. Inside the jet, right there, sealed behind stealth-quality doors, a UAE general leaned forward, eyes wide. That was intentional, the Saudi captain replied quietly. That was a message, 'cause that tiny movement, that soft, almost invisible shift did more damage to Western confidence than any flypast could. Have the bay sealed itself again instantly, silent, perfectly. Flush. The J-35 powered down, exactly as it had powered up, controlled, calm. Almost cold, the hum faded. The canopy normalized. The lights went dark. And yet, the crowd didn't move, because everyone had just witnessed something unprecedented. A next-generation stealth fighter. Powering up critical systems in the middle of the world's busiest airshow without a single malfunction. A British journalist spoke into her camera. They just showed a working Chinese 5th-gen avionics suite. 8. In public? As if it were nothing. Behind her, experts from every nation stood frozen, not excited. Not impressed, but unsettled. The J-35 hadn't flown. Hadn't lit an engine. Hadn't opened a bay fully, but somehow, it felt like the deadliest aircraft in the region. A silent challenger making everyone reconsider what Chinese aviation meant, and for the first time all day. The noise of the airshow didn't matter anymore. Dubai never gets truly dark, even after the airshow closes. The runways glow in silver. City lights spill across the desert. And every aircraft on display stays lit like a museum. Peace under a perfect sky. But the space around the J-35 felt different. The jet seemed to carry its own shadow, a kind of quiet gravity that pulled attention even after the crowds thinned. Delegations didn't leave. Pilots didn't head back to hotels. Engineers lingered in small clusters, staring at the aircraft the way astronomers study a star they don't fully understand yet, because deep down, everyone knew China hadn't brought a prototype. They had brought intent. Cold, deliberate intent. A circle of Saudi officers stood near the wingtip, speaking in low, heavy tones. "We expected a mock-up," one murmured. "What we got is something ready." Another officer pointed at the flawless finishing along the fuselage. No vibration plates. No temporary mounts. No test seams. This isn't pre-production. This is beyond that. A third officer completed the thought. China didn't bring technology today. They brought confidence. Silence followed, the silence of men revising their entire strategy without saying it aloud. Across the tarmac, the Indian delegation was equally unsettled. Their AMCA's stealth fighter project was still years away, maybe a decade. An Indian aerospace engineer whispered, "This jet, It'll be flying from new Chinese carriers before our first prototype even rolls out fully. His colleague didn't disagree. Every detail seen earlier, the surface finish, the fusion block activation, the Bay test cycle pointed to one truth. This wasn't a platform preparing for the future, it was a platform already living in it. The Russian team, normally proud and dismissive of Chinese designs, stood in rare silence. One Su-57 specialist stared at the trailing edges, almost troubled. "The finishing is cleaner than anything we produce," he said quietly. "No ripples. No roughness." His partner nodded, double quotes. "And the stealth shaping absorbs light better than the Su-57 ever has." Neither man said the rest. Russia had been surpassed, but the most telling reaction of the night came from the Americans. 3 F-35. Program officers stood near the J-35's nose, arms folded, eyes locked on the airframe. One finally broke the silence. "We underestimated how fast they solved their composite issues." Another nodded slowly. "And that EOTS? That was not a showpiece. That was operational." The oldest officer exhaled, a long, defeated breath. "This jet isn't here for customers," he said. "It's here for competitors." And he was right. Nothing about the J-35's presence was aimed at marketing. China didn't bring brochures. They didn't bring hype. They brought a message. Nearby, a group of Emirati children walked past the lineup of jets. They pointed excitedly at the Typhoon. They clapped at the Rafale. They waved at the F-16. Then they reached the J-35. Their smiles faded into quiet awe. One boy whispered, "It looks like it's watching us." His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, son," he said softly. "It looks like it doesn't need to." As midnight approached, the tarmac emptied. Runway lights dimmed. City glow softened. But the J-35 remained at the center of everything. A silent figure with more presence than any roaring aircraft of the entire day. It hadn't flown. It hadn't fired. It hadn't even opened its weapons bay fully. Yet it dominated by doing nothing except being real. A French pilot heading out finally voiced what countless others were thinking. The J-35 didn't silence Dubai. We silenced ourselves when we understood what we were looking at. And as the desert wind swept across the empty runway, the truth lingered heavy in the night air. China hadn't just shown a fighter. They showed a rival, quiet, cold, undeniable. The era of catch-up was over. The J-35 had entered the chat, and it didn't need a single decibel to rewrite the balance of power.